Well, good evening and welcome to this week's edition of Old Romans Unscripted, our 63rd episode, and I'm delighted to welcome now we've got Brother Stanislaus. There we are.
How are you?
Hello, how are you? I'm very well, thank you. You?
Yes, doing well, thank you.
How was your week?
It's been, as you know, I guess eventful in some ways, but, busy.
Eventful?
Yeah.
Okie dokie. Well, there's been lots in the news this past week. There's a lot to potentially get through, but we'll see how we do. As you know, we sometimes get stuck on a particular subject, but we'll see. Bishop Kelly sends his regards to you all, but he is still on vacance, and Father Tom is going to be with us just any minute now, once he actually sits down in front of his screen. Takes a big deep breath.
Sure, yeah.
And here we are. Let's bring him online on stream now. Here we go. Now we're in the Dallas formation. So there we are. Hi, Father Tom. How are you?
Doing well. I had to get my mom's laptop up. Apparently, she couldn't find the link for the show.
Okay. Now, is it possible that she can wear headphones as well? Because we're getting the feedback. Oh, the wonders of modern technology.
It is a wonder.
It is.
I wonder how. Yeah, I wonder how I am able to do what I do.
It really is quite incredible. I mean, when you think, well, I mean, you and I could think just back, say 20 years ago, the turn of the 21st century, something like this would just not be possible to, us as ordinary people. We just wouldn't have this.
I think we should be good.
Oh, sounds good.
Yeah. I tell the stories about being freshman in college, and this would be, I guess, let me think, 1983, something like that.
Oh gosh!
And we were, when our papers were due, there were only so many typewriters available on campus, and so you'd have to search. And I knew of a secret one in the basement of the library that I would, go seek out. But now, of course, you can do everything from right where you're sitting, as where this is an example.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I mean, I remember when I was studying and electronic word processors came out.
Yeah.
And I remember as years before that when home computers came out, and I remember one of the early ones was called a ZX Sinclair 81, I think, and it was no good for writing sort of essays, because it would have to reprint the whole screen after every letter you put down. It would take an age. But speaking of technologies and the past, I did want to bring up, which maybe I should actually keep to the end because it's a good news story. But then again, why don't we start with something that joyful, and then maybe that'll keep us going in the mood. So hopefully this will work if I attempt to share it, and then I need to find it here and blow it up, or no, I just click on it. There. So this was an article that appeared in today's tablet, talking about how mass rocks are making a comeback in Ireland. So as some will know, of course, during the pandemic, the Irish government were particularly draconian in their lockdown restrictions, forbidding public worship of any kind whatsoever at all, except one loophole being the great outdoors. And after a mass that went viral on the internet of an Easter Sunday mass celebrated at a very ancient and well-known mass rock in Ireland, suddenly there has been a spate of priests searching out the old mass rocks from the days when Catholicism was outlawed in Ireland, and have begun to offer masses, and masses with a particular intention, so that actually this effort is now being organised by now bear with me, being organised by Aid to the Church in Need, which of course is a Catholic charity that focuses particularly on the persecuted church. And now there are masses being said all up and down Ireland, and these old mass rocks are being rediscovered. For those who don't know what a mass rock is, it is essentially a rock upon which mass is said. And for those of you who don't know your history, in the 16th, 17th and 18th centuries, when Ireland was under British rule, Catholicism was outlawed, and mass therefore was forbidden. So these mass rocks are located in secluded places, high on mountains, deep in woods, at the bottom of valleys, places where the British wouldn't be able to find the worshippers. So, Reverend Brethren, any thoughts on this development?
It's about time.
Yeah, it's a shame that it took till this Easter to get it going.
I mean, seriously, they should have been doing that from day one. But you see the demographic of the priests that are doing it. They're my age or younger, so you would have to do the research. You'd have to know about it, because it wasn't being taught in seminary, of course. So they had to do the research on their own. So having the downtime they did to become a little bit more orthodox theology and understanding of the faith, you see they discovered this history, this rich, beautiful icon of their faith, their ancestors, and they're like, yeah, we're gonna do this. We're gonna double down on Catholicism, and we're gonna go and offer the Mass on our ancestors' place. And I mean, that's a beautiful testament to the actual conviction that these priests have, and the faithful willing to make the trek out. Because as you mentioned, they're not in ideal places. You know, these are places where you have to journey, and it's going to take some work to get there. But when you get there, it's worth it. And the one thing you notice is these Mass rocks are set up ad orientem. There's no versus populum with these rocks. You can't do it because they're made in a rock. Like, this is a massive, some of them are made in massive boulders, and they're, hedged out, cut out. And some of them, I guess, in the field, you could probably do a versus populum if you wanted to. But if you saw the pictures, everything that's being posted right now about this, it's all ad orientem. And it's a beautiful testimony to the living faith, the love, the true charity. We often talk about charity, the sacrificial love that these priests are willing to endure, and that the faithful are willing to do to support these priests. So tapa the beretta or capuche to to these men and the faithful, and God be with them, and hopefully they continue to do it for many more years, regardless of a pandemic or not. Keep it going. I think it's a beautiful thing that the Irish have in their history that should continue on as a memento, if anything, to this is what our ancestors, this is what our forefathers did for us to have the faith today. Because if they didn't do that then, there's a good chance Ireland would not have maintained the faith the way they did. Of course, now they're losing it again, but that's a whole different subject matter. And Bishop Kelly's not here, so I don't want to rain on his parade too much since he's not here to defend his people. God bless him. But we do offer a Te Deum for these priests, for the faithful, and hopefully this is going to be the seed that's going to plant to make Ireland Catholic again.
Well, that's certainly the hope expressed by those priests who have been interviewed. I mean, there is still a tradition in some places where once a month they hold a Sunday Mass at a Mass rock. But the whole point of this phenomena is that all these other Mass rocks have been rediscovered and are being reused.
Maybe we can fly Bishop Kelly out, and we can all get together and do one on one of the Mass rocks out there.
That'd be nice. Now, I mean, I don't know, Brother Stanislaus, if you will remember, but what it put in mind for me, this article and this news, was a film made in the 70s called The Catholics, and the opening scene is of an outdoor Mass being offered on a Mass rock on a peninsula, and it's there's windy as hell, but it's the traditional Latin Mass that is being offered. That is one thing I would say about the current situation. Of course, it would be better if those masses were the Tridentine Mass, but still. But the whole point of that movie, The Catholics, the premise for it was that Vatican III had happened, and that the Tridentine Mass had been banned. And these were the last priests. They were a remote community of monks who were the only priests in Ireland still saying the Old Mass, and they were utilising the Mass rocks to do it with. and a very young then, or youngish, Martin Sheen plays the Vatican investigator, because rather like the Lefebvre phenomenon early in the SSPX days, or in the SSPX early days rather, this rebellion of course attracts the press attention, so comes to the attention of the Vatican. They send an investigator who is played by Martin Sheen. He visits the island, off island, where this community live, and basically is there to tell them that it has to be shut down. And what's kind of interesting in the movie is that the monks are absolutely adamant. They're resolute that they want to keep saying the Mass, and it's the abbot who is confused and essentially is having a crisis of faith, but chooses at the end of the movie to stick with Rome rather than do what the community want, which is to rebel in order to keep the Mass of the Ages. So it's a good film. It's very difficult to find. It is possible to find, but it's not easy to find online. So do look for it. It's called, I think it's called Catholics or The Catholics. Look for Martin Sheen and The Catholics. But Brother Stanislaus, do you remember that film? Had you seen that film?
I don't. I've never even heard of it, so I'm anxious to kind of look it up. However, probably everyone who's watching knows Martin Sheen. Anything with Martin, he's got a reputation. So I don't have to kind of guess to the perspective. He wouldn't have done a Catholic movie if it wasn't coming from his particular Catholic perspective, which is, is different. Martin Sheen, to his credit, has always professed publicly his Catholic faith. So I don't know. Also, as we're watching right now, when I read this article, and I thought, I'm going to take a little bit of a different take, as you might have guessed, on this. And this article, I think, kind of touches on almost everything that's going on in the Catholic world right now. But what bothers me, what initially bothered me, because I'm not Irish, I'm not from Europe, I don't know, I maybe know some history, but I don't know about them. So I was anxious to maybe ask Bishop Kelly to explain to me the devotion of these Mass rocks. So I did a little bit more research, and I thought, okay, well, there's something particular there in Ireland in regards to these rocks, because the first thing I thought of was sort of this phenomenon here in the United States of what we call the JP2 priests. And in fact, JP2 priests would be about my age. They were all ordained around, what they would call the great glorious time of John Paul II and, his papacy and all of that. But you might know part of the story during World War II, that he would celebrate Holy Mass wherever he could. In a canoe, on a rock, on a mountainside. He had his people there. Okay. That's all well and good, because Holy Mass, because here's the different take I'm taking. Holy Mass, as we know, it should only be properly celebrated in a properly consecrated place. For that. However, the Church speaks about, as well canonically we'll read about, times of emergency, when there's a necessity to do these things. And of course, I don't think you would find anybody that wouldn't argue like me. We're in that time. Of course, I think our existence as old Romans is tied to that. How it's impossible to get away from that. But there is something going on. I think we all agree that there is something going on in the sense of the gravity of what's going on with the Church. So, with that being said, what bothers me is the sentiment and emotion that is typically involved with these things. It reminds me of what I know here in the United States of the charismatic renewal. Lots of good things. I know lots of wonderful people, devoted people. However, what ends up happening is that we're chasing that fix, that feeling, that emotion, and you can get it. You can, because that's why the cathedrals were built. That's why there was the great, wonderful orchestrations that were made devoted to saints and the Sacred Heart and the Immaculate Heart, because it moves us. But the sentimentality and emotion sometimes involved with things like this, what I find is that, yes, Father, I think Father's properly correct. Small steps, and sometimes that's all somebody can take. What happens, however, is because of the lack of proper catechesis and just physical priest, the body of a priest to be present, that's all that the faithful end up getting, is that baby step. Because there's not enough priests to go around to continue to properly catechize and guide these people along their way. So, now this is my opinion, that part of the problem of the charismatic renewal is that I think you find people locked in this place of constantly looking for emotion, what moves me. And they tie that with their piety and with where they are spiritually. So how many, I know we've all experienced people like this that believe because they're doing constant devotional activity that's enough. And it might be, it can be, but I have found more often than not of those who I've been able to talk to, it is tied to the emotion. And of course, I'm not alone in this. There are lots of articles and maybe even books have been written about it. So that's what I found in this. However, that's why I thought to do Bishop Kelly's input, because he is from Ireland, he knows all of that. I mean, Excellency, you're close there, but you're a Brit, so I don't know how much you would know about what's going on in Ireland, at least with the emotions. Because
Can I say it? I mean, Archbishop Trump's not entirely British; he's more Welsh, but
I am.
He kind of identifies more with Ireland than Britain.
Yeah.
Sorry,
but that said,
I spent a month with the guy. I know. Sorry, I
think
all the inside jokes
be,
are coming out.
I think it would be interesting. I think it would be really wonderful if the Mass Rocks did recapture the imagination and if necessary, pull on the heartstrings of the faithful in Ireland. If it's then, as you say, brother, followed up with and continued with real and proper catechesis and given somewhere to manifest itself.
Well,
other than just the euphoria or the emotion.
A few points I'd like to just piggyback on, because I think brother made a lot of great points. The one thing I'll just slightly disagree with, I don't think this is necessarily a charismatic movement like we've seen here in the States or in other places that we may be familiar with. I think this is actually a genuine, rooted Orthodox sense that they're trying to develop. And I think because of this, I would actually put, if I was a betting man, which I'm not, because mendicants can't bet or gamble. But if I was, I wouldn't be surprised if you started seeing some SSPX or FSSP or maybe even some old Romans getting a hold of these Mass Rocks as well. Because, I mean, they're not claimed. They're not diocesan. They're not under canonical rule. So they're found. There's nothing preventing any one of us, well, I mean, myself and brother, of course, getting a plane ticket, but yourself, getting a plane ticket as well.
we're all in lockdowns and stuff as well. But
anyways, with not everything going on, we could easily just go over there, offer mass, and be fine. And I wouldn't be surprised if you started seeing SSPX or maybe some actual traditionalist clergy. Hey, we're gonna pick up where these where the Navasota is falling short. They found the rocks for us.
To be fair, I think this is something that the SSPX have done before.
But maybe do it on a more regular, like, since it's being publicized and stuff.
Yeah.
Make it a more regular thing.
Perhaps I think they have. But of course, the SSPX on the whole generally have been a lot braver than most of us.
True. Well, and they got the support. They got the benefactors. I mean,
but and certainly, mass rocks are not. Although they, culturally are a particular phenomena related to Irish history, they're not solely an Irish cultural thing. Other places in Europe have also utilised them.
I'm glad you were saying that, because one is that I do have some understanding of what it means to identify with Wales as opposed to Britain and all of that. So I do apologise if I...
The interesting thing is, the Welsh, the Irish, and the Scots have got no problem being identified as Celts, or indeed as British, because we are the original Britons. We are the original British. Those English lot, and of course, they're all Anglo-Saxons. They're actually Germans.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And if they're not German, they're French, because they're Normans.
Yes.
And we were driven, you see, we were driven to the extremities by them.
So I wanted to kind of maybe introduce, for my part, as old Romans, I think it's important to point out that that's why I go to sentimentality and emotionals first, because what they're doing, as well intended those priests might be, they're wrong. They're being taught some very wrong things. Now, as we all know, that's not baby steps. What I'm talking about are not baby steps. If I go, sometimes we call them truth bombs. And truth bombs sometimes don't do the work that it's intended to, that you think it should do. And so, like Father was pointing out, you do need, baby steps. Some do. Some can take the truth bombs. But most can't. But that, that's what I look at, whether it's here in the United States or in Ireland, wherever. From my perspective, I wouldn't be an old Roman if I didn't believe this. I don't know exactly what it is that's going on, but I'm doubtful. And I think we all agree to that.
Here. I'll drink to that. Cheers.
Okay, so now I'm just setting things up for... oh, don't do that. No. Get back. Okay. So let's move on to another subject. Add to stream. That's it. Okay. And here we go. Now, of course, this has been a big focus of the news this week.
Oh boy.
So there's the headline: Biden doesn't expect not to be admitted to Holy Communion. And why, of course, does he think that? Well, this week the USCCB, is that right? Yeah, that's right. Have been meeting and discussing this issue of giving, who is worthy to receive Holy Communion, and with a particular emphasis, of course, on certain people living certain lifestyles or holding certain views or campaigning politically for them. Brother Stanislaus, do you want to give us give us your take on the events this week?
Yeah, so with this administration, and even I'll throw in the Supreme Court because some things came through on that, with it centering on people on Catholicism, at least what the public understands as Catholicism, and whether or not this president, who claims to be Catholic, should receive Holy Communion, publicly receive Holy Communion. So everyone knows the headlines and what he said. Well, it's a private thing, because remember, that's the first thing he said. It's a private matter, and I don't think that will happen. Okay, he's absolutely right on both accounts, because I don't care what these bishops say, what they proclaim, what they say, we're going to work on this. They're not going to say anything different than what they've already said. All that's going to come out of this is meetings and maybe a couple of papers or documents. Nothing is going to change. And so I believe that when he was in Europe for the G7 summit, that he was supposed to meet with Pope Francis. That was his intention, to go to Holy Mass. Now, it was reported here that was, once it found out that wasn't going to happen, because had he received Holy Communion just before the USCCB conference, then the Pope would be taking a side. And then here, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. We have a congressman, I don't know if you know this, Ted Lieu from California, who is a professed Catholic, public Catholic, much like some other Californians, but he has publicly challenged the bishop out there,
Archbishop Gomez.
I dare you not to give me a Holy Communion. And Archbishop Gomez, I have problems with the guy, as I'm sure we all do. I don't know what he's going to do. He's in a tough spot, because if he doesn't do anything, because reporters are going to take pictures of him receiving Holy Communion. Mm-hmm. They're going to be there. And if he does deny him, then why have a document? Why have an argument? Because he's just said which is what he should rightly do. So what's going to happen? Nothing. Nothing's going to happen. And everyone's going to be allowed to go back to their corners and believe what they believe. As we say here, it might be the same true in the UK, but here is, well, that's your truth. My truth is this. And that's what Joe Biden is saying, is hey, this is my truth, this is my Catholic truth. There are people who have their Catholic truth. It's a personal matter. And, we all understand, the three of us understand the gravity of counseling, and then even to the confessional. And it is, unless someone like him, or like Ted Lieu, who has gone on Twitter, and it's perfectly, to me, I would say, and this is just my answer, and please correct me, Excellency, but I would say, if I were Archbishop Gomez, I don't have to do anything. Mr. Ted Lieu has already done it by publicly proclaiming what he has. I don't have to say a word. And if you want to use the E word, or go to Latin and say, well, this is a medicinal excommunication that happens automatically simply because he publicly did that, it's no longer private, is my point, for him. So, I think I don't know what he's going to do, because he's got to do something. So.
Well, I mean, in the first instance, the reception of Holy Communion is not something that is private. It's never something private. Now, it may take context. It may take place sometimes in a context that is private, like viaticum at somebody's bedside. But technically, even then, whenever we receive Holy Communion, whether we receive it during a great Mass, or when we receive it on our deathbed privately with just a couple of people around, it is a public act. It is a public sign. The communion, of course, signifies not just communion with God through Christ, but by extension communion with all those who are in and of God. So Mr. Lieu and the others, Mr. Biden, who claim or who try to suggest, and Gregory Wilson to boot as well, that this is somehow a matter of personal, this belongs to the private sphere or the personal sphere, are absolutely wrong. It's not. Receiving Holy Communion is a public act that states adherence to, belief in the doctrines of the church, and the doctrines and the disciplines of the church. Now, we all know, of course, that the vast majority of people don't receive the Eucharist worthily. That is to say, very few these days are in an actual state of grace when they receive the Eucharist, meaning that they have been to confession and received absolution, but already things are bad. But when somebody goes forward and receives the Eucharist, who in their public life contradicts the Church's teaching, her beliefs and her disciplines, then that is a actual act, deliberate, willful act, in fact, of blasphemy and sacrilege. And Archbishop Gomez, I would hope that should Mr. Liu present himself tomorrow at the Archbishop's Mass and the Archbishop is distributing communion, I hope the Archbishop gives him a blessing. I hope he gives him a blessing and doesn't give him the Eucharist. Because
Gomez doesn't have a spine.
Well, one has to ask, I mean, what has been the Archbishop's practice until now?
Nothing. He's the president of the USCCB.
No. What I'm saying is, tomorrow won't be the first time that Mr. Liu has been to Mass and attempted to receive Holy Communion, will it? So
right, he's received before.
Right. So do we know if Archbishop Gomez gave him communion before? Has he given him communion on previous times or not?
Probably without.
I
don't know that he attends the Archbishop's Mass. I don't know what parish he attends.
But under the Archbishop,
because the point
under the Archbishop, any clergy is under his rule, though.
Yeah.
So he would have been.
But the point is that what the USCCB, what it would seem the majority of them have wanted to do, is to underline and underscore what is already church discipline and law regarding this issue. It's not, it's typical of the media today to turn this into a debate, but it's not up for debate. It's not a thing that can be debated. If the only way this could be changed is if the Holy See itself rewrites the canons and changes and permits these unworthy people to receive communion. Otherwise,
well, don't tempt Pope Francis. He may just do it. He just may do it. Well, that's a challenge he's willing to accept.
He's already doing.
He's already messed with so much. Why not?
He's already doing things. But the point is that strictly speaking, Archbishop Gomez or any one of his priests or any Catholic priest in the United States, irrespective of his office, technically speaking, in theory, should be withholding communion from all these people.
Well, 100%. I would say canonically, and not in theory and practice, because if anybody gives Holy Communion to any one of these people, they are committing a mortal sin. They are bringing damnation not only to the soul that is receiving our Lord unworthily, but them knowing. And if they don't know, they should not be giving out Holy Communion. They should not be a minister of the church. If they do not know the fundamental sacramental theology of what you're doing,
well, this is
you're
the question,
only bringing damnation to yourself. St. Paul, we had a feast of Corpus Christi and a wonderful octave of it where you got to reflect every single day on that epistle that brings, I don't know about you, it brings me to my knees, trembles every single time you read those words. Because first and foremost, none of us, no living creature is worthy to receive our Lord in the Holy Eucharist, body, blood, soul, and divinity. It is only by his humility and his love in his grace through the sacrament of confession, that we humble ourselves and try to prepare ourselves worthy to receive him. It's only by him that we can receive him, because we are not worthy of our own accord. And people forget that because they're so prideful and they're so staunch, and they believe what they're doing is right. And I'm like, I'm sorry, but if you believe you can kill millions of innocent lives and go up and our Lord's going to be happy with you, you got another thing coming. And St. Paul says it very clearly. You will eat and drink damnation upon yourself. And for the ministers, for the priests, for the bishops, for the archbishops, for whoever, they will bring condemnation upon themselves for doing it and allowing it to happen. Now, there is no sugarcoating this. There can, like you said, there's no debate. We need, for the salvation of their souls, to preach the truth. We need to love and explain to them and catechize them. Because,
but of course, that is the fundamental problem, though. That is, basically the core issue with the Conciliar Church, with the Novus Ordo, is, they are Pilate asking the question, what is truth?
Right.
As brother was saying earlier, they have this whole relativistic mentality, which is why they even think that this is something that they can debate amongst themselves. I mean,
the Conciliar Church threw out truth in 1962 when they opened up the window.
Well, as we know, as old Romans, that we can go back another 100 years, at least 150 years, when things started to happen, the changes started to begin for whatever reasons, and this is what I get to, and this is. Maybe it's because I'm the freshman in the group amongst as old Romans. So I might be taking a perspective that others see as old or maybe worn out. But for me, when I'm hearing both of you, what I hear you say, I don't disagree at all. So, okay, then, why do we seem to be sidestepping what is the truth? There is no question as to what the truth is. And I believe that the truth we hold within what that the old Romans, although we are a community, have never become a community in the sense that I don't know if people realize that we are simply a continuation of what had always been since the 4th century when St. Willibrord founded the See of Utrecht. And we believe that we hold what was properly given to that historic see, and that those sacraments, we hold what is true. Now the problem I think that sometimes comes with that is that it sounds like we're saying we're the true church, and they're not. And of course, that's not what we're saying at all. We're not saying. What we're saying is that, in many ways, quo vadis, where are you going? What's wrong with you? And I've had 2 discussions this week. One with one of my priest friends that we went to school with, and one with a gentleman I've known for many years here in Detroit. And they were both pretty heated because I challenged them on these things. Not because, like I told Father, I said, not because I challenging you on your vocation or what you're doing or what. It's because he says the same things I do, except they circle back around to the error that they're pointing out. And I'm over here saying, whoa, so that's how I look at whether it's Joe Biden or Nancy Pelosi or any of these guys, whether it's Archbishop Gomez or Sue Petch, it doesn't matter. Let's look at what is true, because that's how we're going to, what has always been true, and what we have. I don't know, the Novus, like we said, I don't know the Novus Ordo, 50 years of a lot of doubt. And as someone who is concerned primarily for my soul, and then for those whom the Lord puts in my path, I have a responsibility to give them the truth, especially when they ask. And so when they ask about, devotion and the most blessed sacrament, okay, if there's doubt, why not put your trust in what has always been true?
Yeah.
And if we don't proclaim that as old Romans, I don't know then why we exist.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it is the raison d'etre of us all. I mean, being an old Roman is, it's not the path of celebrity and status and riches and wealth and general adulation from people. It's quite the opposite. It's always been a rocky road, and invariably it means, even holding to the truth means sometimes even being a fool for Christ, or bearing that persona that people want to, put on us when they try to, deride and derogate us. But it always comes down, in all these conversations, brother, that you're having now, that Father Tom and I have had, with others over the years, it always comes down to the truth, which is undeniable, and which they recognise, but which they pack bedel away from, because to recognise the truth would mean having to reconsider a lot of the assumptions that they have, lived with for most of their lives,
and like a trusted friend. I mean, for so many of them, especially daily mass goers.
Yeah.
Last week, that's what I had mentioned. Father Chicana, may he rest in peace. I mentioned his old article. How do you tell in Helen? That is a problem. That's how do you go to these people who are doing what they feel is right? And some of them 30, 40, 50 years, daily mass. Something's happening, but I can tell them there's more because they haven't been given the proper catechesis. They don't know. And that's why, with all this going on with the USCCB, and that's what you hear, that document that the 60-something Democrat lawmakers sent immediately to the bishops, saying how they were devoted Catholics and all this. And I think, but that's the church. I mean, that's the American church. The most successful churches in Detroit, meaning the ones who have money, who are doing, that have 3 or 4 priests, and they have their 4,000 family parishes, and you look at their weekly donations and they get hundreds of thousands every month. They're successful because they sound like the world. They look Catholic, but go in there. And even, I know the priests, I know a lot of them. Good men, I know, that. But then think, how can you say that? How can you stand up there and wear your collar and say what you say? I don't get it. If you believe,
do they actually wear collars?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Most of them wear polos.
Yeah.
And I've seen some of those churches in Detroit, brother. They do not look Catholic at all. Like if you were to take St. Thomas Aquinas and you're like, hey, I'm going to bring you to a Catholic church in Detroit, he'd burn the place down. He's like, this is not Catholic.
Anybody would,
Just
I mean, we don't even.
Yeah.
We can just go to. Sometimes we bring up Venerable Archbishop Fulton Sheen. He, not long ago, I mean, there's still people who knew him, who testify about his life here in the United States. Okay, what would he say? He has a wonderful book and a video called "This Is the Mass," and he explains step by step. Now, but not the Novus Ordo. And I don't know what he would think. I mean, we know that at the council, the Vatican II Council, there were lots of council fathers who disagreed wholeheartedly.
Yeah, I mean, Sheen is an interesting one because in the 70s he did sort of drink the Kool-Aid,
Yeah. They all did. Not making it right, but
no.
That was that success. As Father was pointing out, like with so many of our brethren in the SSPX, and we're compadres with in some sense. They have money, and I have yet to meet an old Roman, a minister, in any mission, and I haven't met a lot of them, but I've come through with several. I haven't met anybody who's got any money. I haven't met anybody that's got this great. I mean, we all would welcome a great benefactor, but
yeah,
I haven't met anybody, and unfortunately, that's most of the time that's how the world measures success.
Oh yeah.
Is.
Well, that's essentially how Protestantism. And now this kind of Protestantized Catholicism that is the Conciliar Church, that's their interpretation of fruits is manifest in materialism, whereas it's quite clear from Scripture that fruit is spiritual. It's spiritual. Yeah. It's not about physical numbers. It's not about physical cash. It's not about physical assets. It's got nothing to do with that kind of thing at all. Fruits. Is spiritual fruit. It's at the end of the day, it's as much as heaven, of course, rejoices over the conversion of one sinner. At the same time, better to have one devout, righteous person hearing Mass than to have 20 who are going to subsequently damn themselves by unworthily receiving the Eucharist.
Or maybe, I'm sure Father Giacomo would always point out that, because he would also say, I think Father Giacomo maybe went a step further, as our friends on that side go, the State of the Conscious.
Yeah, he usually does.
And I get it, but I'm not going that step further because I don't believe it. But in regards to the Most Blessed Sacrament, because like the priest I was talking to, that it's, as he pointed out, as they always point out, the indefectibility of the church is impossible. And he sent me this long list of quotes from the fathers up to Fulton Sheen. But they don't realize is that, wait a minute, but what does indefectibility mean? And what you just said pointed to that scripture. What about if there's only one left? If there's only one left, Lord, is the church still there?
That's still the church.
That's right.
Yeah, the church started with 12, 11.
Excellence, as far as I'm concerned, excellency, as long as you're there, then I know the church is still properly ordered according to the way God designed.
Wow.
Wow. I was going to say something, but he's not here. I can't say it. I was going to make a Bishop Kelly joke. I can't. He's not here. I'll just say it anyways. He's not here, if you don't mind. As long as Bishop Kelly's in Chicago, I know I got a basilica with 2 side altars. Sorry.
Cool. Okay, let's move on. So also this week, now this was, this gets to, when we're talking about spiritual fruit. This really sort of highlights a fundamental problem for the Conciliar Church today. So this was Church Militant TV, so I'm sure many of our viewers are aware of. By the way, if you haven't realized, these things that I'm highlighting here, I put the link to theoldroman.com in the comments. So just scroll up and you can find the link, and that will take you to where all these headlines are. Church Militant TV had a summit of 9 persecuted priests in their studio this past week. And I don't know about anyone else, but frankly, this I had to make myself properly listen, because the shock and the scandal that they're talking about, I just take for granted. What I had to do was actually listen to the individual voices and the individual stories. So it would be very easy to say, to watch this interview with these 9 persecuted priests. It would be very easy to just sort of gloss over it and think, well, yes, we all know there's scandal, we all know there's corruption, we all know that etc. But that would actually be a mistake. I think what was powerful this interview, and again, as well, take away the politics of Voris and Church Militant and all that. But what was powerful was the individual testimony of these priests. One of the things that actually I thought bless Voris for was at the beginning of the interview when he asked them, do any of you, disbelieve what the church teaches? Do any of you have any, desire not to be a Catholic? Do any of you, have schismatic tendencies, etc.? To which they all said no. But that was an important point because, again, in theory, properly speaking, canonically, unless you manifest schismatic tendencies, there's no reason for a lawfully instituted pastor of a parish to be turfed out or otherwise have his faculties taken away from him, unless he has committed a crime or he is guilty of manifest heresy, apostasy or schism. He should be left alone. And the point is with these 9 priests, and there are others, of course. Voris was saying, if they had room, they could have filled the studio with 2,000 priests in similar situations up and down the country. But in these cases, these are priests who have been falsely accused, have proven themselves innocent, and otherwise were badly treated, wrongly treated by those who were supposed to be pastors to the pastors, the shepherds to the pastors, meaning the bishops, their father in God. And it was really quite then for me quite moving and upsetting to then remember actually these are the lived experiences of these individuals. Anyone else? What was your reaction?
I am probably going to take an unpopular view to this. I think that was imprudent. I believe these matters should be handled privately, not scandalizing the public. The faithful already know we're in a crisis in the church. They already understand there's a lot of bad stuff happening. Highlighting these type of things, putting these priests out there like they did, name, faces, and all this stuff, opening themselves up to more backlash canonically, because a bishop could go out and say, you're doing something that is disobedient to me and causing me scandal, which can have canonical sanctions, which... let me finish. Because hold on. Let me finish. Because one priest did get sanctioned that was on that show in Rockford. He is removed from his parish. He came back and he got removed.
Right. That doesn't make that right, though.
It doesn't, but nonetheless, these are canonical matters that in the history of the church were never brought to the public eye. They were handled in-house
Internally.
canonically to avoid
Ish.
scandal. Unless needed. You go and you correct your brother privately first. If your brother does not listen, you bring a witness and you go still privately. And then if they do not listen, then publicly. All these matters have not had, I think, canonical due process either side. They have been handled very inappropriately, and they need to be straightened out canonically in a private manner to not bring more grave scandal to the faithful, who are already scandalized and horrified enough and hurt enough. Why do we need to bring more? Why? Because people, going back to the whole thing, clickbaiting, right? Make it so get the views, get the clicks, get the likes. People, unfortunately, as humans, and I experience this in my secular profession, when you see an accident on the road, you get the gawkers. Everybody stops, slows down, and then you get 5 more accidents because people stopped and gawked. And now you got to go deal with 5 more accidents. But people, for whatever we're wired, we will be attracted to horror and terror. We like that stuff, unfortunately. So they play to the psychology of that. I don't think it's in the best interest for these priests, for their bishops, and for their faithful that Church Militant did what they did, and that these priests accepted to do what they did. I think they need to prayerfully see about rectifying whatever damage has been caused from this, and look to fighting the good fight, focusing on what they need to focus on so they can get back to being shepherds and not be sucked into the media hysteria.
I don't disagree with anybody, because I think you both bring up good points. I do, however, want to just stop for a moment, because I'm glad we had this moment. You two know, but if anybody doesn't know that might be watching, I spent several years with Father Perone, who you see in that picture. And that's the parish I was at for many years. And Father Perone, I have to say I know well. I mean, I lived with him. So that was the first time I've seen him in a couple of years, especially since this happened, because when they took him from us, it was overnight. I arrived to Holy Mass to see the vicar for clergy making the announcement. And so that was the first. I was so happy to see him. And I love Father Perone. I would never have wanted to be with anybody else but Father Perone all those years. I learned so much from him, and he, in my estimation, from what I know, celebrated the ancient form properly every morning. And even though I think his understanding is improper, he did the best he could. And it's only that. Assumption Grotto has never stopped celebrating the ancient form of Holy Mass because of Father Perone. So he's done a lot for the community here. He continues to do a lot. A lot of people adore Father Perone, and I'm one of them. Now, with that being said, like what Father said, Father Perone is technically still the pastor of Assumption Grotto, even though he's been removed, because canonically, a pastor has a lot of power. You cannot just remove him. Nobody can. I mean, the Holy Father can, but by that time, it's got to be a really, really serious thing. But you can't. I mean, once you make him the pastor of that flock, it's very difficult. Okay, so Father Perone is technically still a pastor. However, he has been given instruction that he may not appear with priestly garb. That's why he was the only one not wearing his collar. And secondly, of course, he may not act in public as a priest. And then he's not supposed to be talking to anybody. He's not supposed to be giving public interviews if he's following what he's been told by the Archdiocese. See, I know this, and I know any priest who's under any sort of canonical indictment like that. That's what they tell you.
Yeah.
Okay, all of them are breaking what they kind of agreed to do. And then, even though I agree, Excellency, I agree so much because I saw what happened to Father Perone. And it had took, I was only there for 8 years, but he had been suffering through that for many, many, many years before that. And it was such a surprise that they actually succeeded in what they were threatening to do for 20 years to him. Okay, but I think every single one of those men would reconcile with that bishop that they're pointing out is an error. If that bishop approached them and said, "Hey, let's make up." And I think the arguments that they're making, you can't turn away from those. There's no turning back because they're making solid, truthful arguments. And so I think if you want to fight the good fight, you can't do it there. It's not going to happen there. You're going to have to compromise if you intend to be back in your parish, if that's what you want.
Well, I mean, this is the thing, isn't it? It's like there was an earlier episode in the week of the Vortex, which Father oh gosh, what's his name?
Father Altman.
Father Altman kind of guest presented. And I remember I sent you a message and said I don't think he wants to go back to his parish because my thought was, well, after that, how do you resolve things after doing something like that? But the thing is that on the one hand, I hear what you're saying, but I think on the other hand, what some people need to hear is the actual experiences that these guys are enduring, that they're going through. Because a lot of people don't know about that. A lot of people know about the sensational headlines. A lot of people know about the rumours, but they don't know, for example, that for some of these priests, they had to almost, as it were, sign over the confidentiality of their medical records and whatnot. That is, and when they started talking about the whole, diocesan insurance plans and so on and so forth, my stomach just was just churning. My head was splitting with rage because, and then the thought that went through my head was, you have turned my father's house into, from a house of prayer into a den of thieves, because, and those of you who've been watching the Domestic Church series will know, of course, that the emphasis I've been placing on realizing and recognizing ourselves as literal dwelling places of the Spirit, that we are literal tabernacles and temples. And so what's being done and what these men are enduring is truly evil. It is truly evil. It does not come from a good place. There is a lot of malice, willful malice, being perpetrated by these by the powers that be on these men for whatever reason. And I think, in that respect, people need, actually, I think part of the reason, part of the issue here is that they are being sanctioned for having exposed or spoken to the corruption that is going on within the church. Now, Father Tom, you say, everybody knows about that. Well, do they? Because why do they still go every Sunday? Why do they still pay their money into, the diocesan funds or into Peter's Pence or whatever? Why do they pretend to ignore it then?
Well, because you still have an obligation. And the sanctity of the sacrifice and the sacraments does not depend upon the poor, wretched sinner of the minister providing them. So,
no,
whether
but
or not
what you
the
do with
bishop
your
or the
money,
your money
is your own choice.
But yes, so if they don't know there's traditional outlets, they don't know there's other means in which to support the church, which is a precept of the church, that they have to fulfill to remain Catholic. If they don't know the other means in which they can do that, they're just going to continue doing what they've done and put the money in the basket. Now, to their own fault, yes, there are better ways to do that. But again, going back to the poor catechesis for the past 70, 60 years or whatever, they are been manipulated and corralled into this, absent-minded function state, almost like a zombie, if you will. But nonetheless, I think most of the Catholics in this country, in the United States at least, if not the Western world, do know there's a crisis in the church. They can see there is, now what side they're on, is whatever here nor there, but they do understand there is some tension, there is a crisis in the church. And nonetheless, they're still going to continue to try their best to hopefully be good, faithful Catholics. I think, we know a majority of 70% of Catholics here in the United States that are regular Mass attending don't believe in a real presence. That's a huge problem. So yeah, we have a lot of bad stuff happening, but that's not going to stop people from trying to be Catholic and trying to save their souls, regardless, irrespective of the sanctity of the priest, the sanctity of the bishop, the sanctity and the prudence and charitableness of where the money goes. People still have an obligation to save their soul, and they're going to do the best they can in the means they are provided. Now it's our job as old Romans to hopefully save their souls, to bring them out of the darkness into the true light. What's better, walking around the house with a little tiny candle or a little match, or giving them this huge, 500-watt LED lantern and saying, here, light your house with this? We're the ones that are supposed to say, here's this 500, watt LED light that I want you to light your house with. This is going to bring you light. It's going to bring you joy. It's going to bring you warmth. It's going to protect you. It's going to save you. That's our job as old Romans, as clergy. Yeah. And that's why we do these shows. That's why we do, that's why you do what we do. That's why we're doing what we do to the best of our abilities. But at the end of the day, I don't fault the laity for maintaining the trying to being Catholic with the means that they have. Because it's not their fault. At the end of the day, it's not their fault. And I pray for those poor souls because they need it. If there's going to be any chance of salvation, they need it because they're just being led astray, one after another, going off the cliff. And it's terrible. And that's what really gets me. That's what gives me a splitting headache, turns my stomach, is thinking of the countless souls being led astray, leading to the flames of eternal hell by these just terrible men. And that's being polite because I know we're on YouTube and trying to be careful with my terms. But seriously, we all agree. We all agree on this. I'm preaching to a choir and then some. But nonetheless, we keep on fighting a good fight, right? As St. Paul says, endure to the end to receive the crown.
That's all true. But I'd be remiss if I wouldn't mention that, although I understand what you're saying, that I can't help but point out that it tends to sound a bit pharisaical. And I'm afraid that's where a lot of people go, because they think if I just do this, and this, well, I'm going to get this if I keep doing these things. And that's from improper catechesis. That's from not being properly taught. You're right. They're all trying to do the right thing. But you're right. We have a responsibility as old Romans. And I tell those priests, there's a perfect place for you to come fight the good fight right here. Right here.
Yeah.
Come fight it here. Here you can be free. Here you can say it. Because it's not a matter of just disagreeing with Rome. We're speaking the truth, and everybody knows it. It's just that when that happens, one thing is going to happen. One thing is going to happen. You're going to be killed. One way or the other, you're going to be killed. And all of these men that were on there, they're showing that. Regardless of where their theology might be, where their practice might be, they're speaking up for something, and they are getting crucified. And I disagree with a lot of them, the way they've gone about it, or how they, but I do see that. And if I don't point that out, that, proper catechesis. It's not just according to my conscience. It's a well-formed conscience.
Yeah.
And I would challenge any Catholic in this country, like I did to someone yesterday who's been practicing for longer than I have, on that whether or not there was truly a well-formed conscience. Because how could there be if they're not being given the proper catechesis? Except by, of course, by certain grace. But that's so. I want to just on a happy note that I'm so happy, even though I know Michael. I've known him for years. Being in Detroit, you can't help but know him. He and I disagree on a lot of things, but I've never disagreed that you cannot find anything on their website coming from his mouth or any of his commentators that is not the truth. I don't agree with how they say things sometimes, or how they present things. But you can't. Anybody that tells me they go to Church Militant for stuff, I say, oh, okay, well, if you like that. But you're not going to get anything bad from in the sense of a catechesis. Now, practice is one thing, but what they say, in fact, I'll challenge you, Father, since you're point out where they're teaching something wrong. I'm not talking about style, because I'll agree with style. I'm
not talking about style either. I'm talking about theology and doctrine. First and foremost, their teaching on SSPX is contradicting to the magisterium. The magisterium has stated that SSPX is not schismatic, but yet Michael Vorse and his crew. Michael Vorse and his crew continue.
Teaching. That's what I'm talking about.
Yes, it is.
That's not a catechetical teaching. That's just commenting on.
So you're saying something contradicting to what the Vatican has already stated. The Vatican has stated clearly they're not in schism, but you promote and you say they are. That's contradicting the Church. Mm-hmm. Yes, the Vatican has said that. That's not true.
The Vatican has not said that. You'd have to point to me the Vatican document that says that. A cardinal has said that. Canon lawyers have said that. But officially, the Church has not said that about the SSPX. Yes. No way.
Benedict XVI. No way. Anyway, we can talk after the show. We can talk after the show.
Well, I want to make sure because people are listening.
Yeah, I know. So Benedict XVI,
what I'm saying about Church Militant, their teachings, I'm talking about catechism.
Yeah, right. I think your wires are crossed here. If I can step in for a minute.
So here's the thing. You said first and foremost that they speak truth. Now you did not clarify first that it's Catholic truth. You just said truth in general, and that's why I said they're wrong on politics. They're wrong on a lot of political matters. My second point is going to be I'm pretty certain they are not really sound on the whole theology of the body, JP2 thing. They're fairly supportive of that, which is many moral errors into it, and they support that. But
they're modernists.
But I'm just saying. So you said a statement, and I'm giving evidence.
At least what we consider modernists, because they would call themselves traditionalists.
Right. Well, they're the new Baron traditionalists, But either way, all I say is with Church Militant, I do watch their stuff. I do keep tabs on them. I pray for them, just like I pray for all the other people that do social media outreach with a Catholic stamp to it. Because at the end of the day, everybody has a chance at conversion as long as you're upright and breathing and have a conscious mind. You can be brought to the tradition. So I don't hate on them for it. If people, like you said, I'll point out the disagreements. I'll point out the errors, and I'm not doing it to hate on anybody. I'm just saying because if you say something that the Church says and you're contradicting it, I have an issue with that, especially when it's damaging souls. Because SSPX, if it wasn't for SSPX, the United States would probably not have the tradition that it does. Now, then again, playing devil's advocate, who would have known what we would have been like if we didn't have the issues we had? Because in the roaring 40s, 30s and 40s and 50s, 60s, old Roman Catholicism here in the States, Chicago, we had almost 30 missions around Chicagoland area. We were the only game in town. But nonetheless, the chips fall where they fall. And thanks be to Almighty God for Archbishop Lefebvre. And I'm glad that we can have a friendly relationship with most of the clergy and some of the prelates. I know Archbishop Jerome, you probably have a few good connections. Myself and brother, I don't know what your relations are with SSPX, but I can say for myself, we have a lot of good relationships. And I think that's how we're truly going to rebuild the church, to take a Franciscan, point of view, rebuilding the church and making her holy again. I don't mean to rain on brother's parade by any means, because brother, I have utmost respect for you, and I think you're a very highly educated man. I do, and I'm glad to call you a brother in Christ. So I don't want to make it seem like I'm raining on your parade or anything like that, but I just wanted to point out those mainly two issues with Church Militant that I have.
I think it's quite reasonable and is perfectly acceptable to have different perspectives, shall we say, on issues. I think I probably have a third perspective on Church Militant from both of yours, perhaps. But anyway, perhaps next week or another time, that might be a good discussion to have, actually, because there's a lot of things I'd like to say to Christine Niles, particularly. Anyway, we are over time, so thank you, viewers. Bless you for watching. Thank you for commenting. Thank you for some lovely comments, actually, in the live chat on YouTube. Thank you for your prayers and your promise of prayers. That's greatly appreciated. We will, of course, be back next week. Bishop Kelly should be back with us next week. Meanwhile, tomorrow's Mass, of course, will be broadcast 8:30 a.m. GMT +1. That's British summertime. Wait for it, Father Thomas, for a Green Sunday.
Yeah, I saw that, and I was going to ask you about that too.
Green Sunday, because it's semi-double, and it outranks the simplex, which is Saint Silverius. He's only a simple feast, so he only gets commemorated. So it's actually a Green Sunday. I haven't looked ahead, but I know that the following Sunday won't be green. So
and here I have all the red set out, because I was assuming.
No, because
it's going to be a Feast of a Martyr tomorrow.
No, he's a simplex. So he's just a commemoration.
I didn't read the fine print.
Anyway, so that's broadcast tomorrow, and then, of course, the midday Angelus, the evening Angelus, but no Rosary tomorrow. So the next recitation of the Rosary will be on Monday evening. Anyway, go to theoldroman.com, which has just launched this week, a new website, theoldroman.com, where you can find the schedules for programs. You can find past programs. You can be prompted for programs coming up, and you can also find the headlines and articles and features that that are of interest to people who care about Catholic tradition.
Do you have a donation link on that? Is there a donation link on that?
There is a Patreon link. So if you want to become a Patreon and be a patron, look,
get some cool merch.
Get some cool merch. Then there is a Patreon link in the drop down on the About Me page of theoldroman.com. Anyway, that's enough for us this evening. Oh, of course, yes. Dominus vobiscum.
Et cum spiritu tuo.
Sit nomen Domini benedictum, ex hoc nunc et usque in saecula. Auditorium nostrum in nomine Domini.
Qui fecit terram.
Benedictio Dei omnipotentis, Patri et Filii et Spiritus Sancti, descendet super vos et maneat semper. Amen. Indeed. God bless you all. Thank you all for watching. Do consider becoming a patron if you can afford it. Just a few shekels a month would make all the difference to keep us going and to help us to improve things as well. So it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from them.
Until next week. Have a good week. Take care of yourselves. And remember, always,
God bless
of
everyone.
course, God loves you. Bye now.